Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Wealth Preservation Solutions. Kevin Ellman and Paul Miller are going to be presenting to you, as the topic for today is going to be how to be the employer of choice, both during and post-pandemic. So we're going to be going over some key concepts that hopefully you find valuable. And Michael Csedrik, who is our Director of Retirement Planning, also is joining us and will be part of the presentation as well. So without further ado, Kevin, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Very well, thank you. How are you?
Excellent.
All right, I'm going to bring up the presentation and let's get started.
Okie doke. Okay, so our company is Wealth Preservation Solutions, and we are what's called a personal family office. And what we practice is 360-degree family wealth management. So what we've learned over the years is that, most people tend to address their different financial issues. They get a will, they have investments, they buy insurance, but they tend to do it what we call piecemeal, with different people at different times, and oftentimes the different elements are not properly coordinated. So we've developed this concept basically from experience that all the different elements of your financial plan need to be coordinated. They don't have to be done by the same person, but they need to be coordinated. So that includes everything to do with wills and trusts, your investment plan, all of your insurance, all of your employee benefits, and succession plans. If you are philanthropic, that has to be coordinated. But the biggest piece of all, the number one key to success, is that the advisors are coordinated. So almost everybody has a CPA and a lawyer, and perhaps an insurance person, investment person. And rarely do you get all those people in one room to coordinate. So this is what we have advocated. We function as a quarterback. We want to make sure that the entire team is working together to make sure that the family achieves its goals. Okay, so that's the basic concept. Today, we're only going to be focusing on the family business strategies, the 401k planning, and the key employee retention. And the subsequent seminars will cover some of these other areas. Okay, so let's continue. So Paul and I have written a book, The 7 Biggest 401k Mistakes that Business Owners Make and How to Avoid Them. We are going to give you a pretty good overview today, and I think you'll find it very helpful in figuring out how to approach your 401k program. So if you learn nothing else from this seminar, this is the key slide, and there will be a quiz at the end. So we want to make sure that you have this framework about how to think. How do you think about your 401k? How do you even begin to decide what to do? So we want to make sure we take care of the 3 F's, okay? That's funds, fees, fiduciary responsibilities, in order to avoid the 4th F, which is fines. Now, most people don't realize that the Department of Labor is aggressively out auditing 401k plans, and they often levy fines if things are not handled properly. In addition, it's possible that you could someday have a disgruntled former employee who says, I'm not happy with the way the 401k was handled. Nobody told me what to do. Nobody explained my choices. They didn't have any educational meetings. And therefore, I underperformed what I should have, and I'm going to sue the employer. And unless you have a really good protection plan, which we're going to talk about later, you probably will lose. So if you could scroll forward a couple of slides, one more. Just to give you an idea, these are numbers from 2017. The most recent numbers are actually worse. So the Department of Labor in that 1 year audited 1,700 401k plans. 65% were fined for a total of a little over $1 billion. So that was almost $1 million per plan. So the Department of Labor has figured out this is an easy way to raise money for the government. So today it's even worse. And I think in the course of our career, I've actually run into 2 companies that have been audited, and both were fined approximately $800,000. These are companies that before we got involved with them. So once we were involved, we removed all the problems that might have attracted a fine, and they're now 100% in compliance. So this is another very good way to think about your plan. So if I were to ask any of you, who's your 401k with? Most people would say, they would mention one of the big mutual fund companies or perhaps one of the big insurance companies. They might say, oh, well, we use Prudential, or we have Fidelity, or we have Empower, or John Hancock. And that company is usually what we call the record keeper. And because they're a mutual fund company, you think, oh, well, they're doing everything. But they're really not. They're really, you send, let's say your plan is with John Hancock. You send the money to John Hancock from your payroll, and they're the ones that decide, they don't decide, but they then divvy up that money into each employee's accounts, and they keep track of how much they invested, what do they invest in, what has been their return, who's their beneficiary, did they take any distributions? All that record keeping is done by that big, mostly mutual fund companies or insurance companies. Now, in addition, there are separate investment managers. So you could have, say, a plan with Fidelity, and you could also have mutual funds from State Street or Vanguard or Franklin or any other company. So the investment managers are separate from the record keeper. And most companies today have something called open architecture, where even if you're with a Fidelity plan, you have investment managers from anywhere you want, okay? Now, there's another group called the third-party administrator, and they're the ones that basically file the tax return. So you may remember every year you have to file this Form 5500 with the IRS. They're the ones that are primarily responsible for preparing that. They also do what's called the testing to make sure that you're passing all the rules about who's going to participate in the plan and how much they put in. So, and typically, these are three different companies. And typically, the advisor, which would be somebody like us, is coordinating all those parties to make sure that the plan sponsor, which is you, are getting exactly what you want out of the plan and that you avoid any lawsuits or fines, okay? Occasionally, one last point, occasionally for some smaller plans, they'll be what's called bundled, and you'll have all these different parties in one plan. But that's the exception rather than the rule. Usually it's three different groups. So I'm going to take you through a case study and with Mike's help, and we're going to, you'll see from real life examples how this works. So this is an actual company. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. And it's they have 86 employees. They have a little over 5 million in assets. That's the total amount of money in the plan. And every year, they're putting in about $370,000 annual contributions. And as you know, as the company grows, that's going up a little bit every year. Next. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to look at the first F. So we're going to look at the funds and see if there's anything about the funds that we should be doing better. So in this company, they have 22 investment funds, all mutual funds. Sounds like a lot. Sounds like that's pretty good. And the average fund expense is 1.14%. Now, you may or may not know that, but that's actually quite expensive. The average for all mutual funds in the world is about 1%. So this is a little high. And we're going to show it's a little high for another reason in a minute. Now, they also don't have something, it's got a fancy name. It's called a Qualified Default Investment Alternative. We say QDIA. And what that means is, let's say you sign up a new employee and you send them all the information and they're busy working and they're not that interested and they don't do anything. They leave their money in cash and they work for you for 20 years. And at the end, they have, $100,000 in the plan. And then they retire, they leave the company, they take the money out and they realize, wait a second, I should have been invested in the stock market all this time. I could have made 10% a year. I could have $300,000 or $400,000. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you educate me? Why didn't you tell me what my options are? You should have helped me. I don't know anything about this. Somebody should have helped me. They'll bring a lawsuit. And unless you have one of these qualified default investment alternatives, you probably will lose and have to make up the difference between what they had and what they should have had. So the qualified default investment alternative is going to be typically one of two things, a target date fund or a risk-based model. And Mike's going to explain these to us in 1 minute. So what that means is if they join the company and they sign up for the plan, if they do nothing, they get put into one of these default funds, okay? And as long as you have that default fund, and you set it up properly, they can't, or they could sue you, but they won't win. Okay, that's the main thing. So let's keep going. And we're going to come to the specific explanations in 1 second. So in this case, even though they had 22 different funds, which sounds like it should be diversified. Well, we have 22 funds, it's diversified. But you have to have 22 funds in all different categories. Large companies, small companies, growth companies, value companies, international companies. And again, if you don't have a complete, well-rounded lineup, you run the risk of somebody saying to you, well, I wanted to invest in small cap funds, but you didn't have a small cap fund. And small cap funds did better than large cap funds. Therefore, I'm going to sue you and you owe me money. That's a little harder to win, but they have a pretty good case. So as a result, unless you have a well-rounded lineup, and we're going to show you in a minute how to do that, the owners are subject to liabilities. So, we say, who needs that? So we're going to show you how to protect yourself against that. Keep going. So this is one of my favorite sayings. Are you overpaying for underperformance? So if you go to the next slide, you may or may not know that there are basically two categories of mutual funds. You have what's called active funds, and you have passive funds or index funds. Now, with an active fund, you might have a team of 20 brainiacs who are PhDs, and they're all trying to figure out how to beat the market. We're going to buy this stock and sell that stock. We're going to go here, we're going to go there. We're going to try to outperform the market. And everybody hopes that that's going to work. Unfortunately, the statistics are that, take a look at this chart, between 85 and 97% of active mutual funds fail to even meet their benchmark. So let me give you an example of what that means. Let's say you buy the XYZ large cap mutual fund, and we're going to compare that to the S&P 500. So what that means is that for 10 years, 85% of the active large cap mutual funds don't even produce what you could have earned if you just put your money in the S&P 500. And the same is true in every single category. So I'm going to say this, you may challenge it, but the facts are on my side. Active money management doesn't work, and it's not worth it. So we don't do it. We use passive index funds that are extremely low cost, and we know we are absolutely, because we're buying the index, we know we're going to meet the index. Now, we're not going to beat it. We may get a little bit extra by clever asset allocation, a little bit, but we're never going to lag the index. Okay, so let's keep going. This is an interesting chart. This shows year by year which is the best performing investment class. So for instance, in 2016, small caps were the best class. They were up 21%. And if you look at the bottom, international stocks, which are the gray ones, were only up 1.5%. So what happens for me personally in my own practice, and that also happens with the groups, the 401k plans, is let's say it's now 2016, and in December, or rather January 2017, I get these calls saying, Kevin, last year small cap was the best investment. Why do we have all our money in small cap? Or they'll say the next year, hey Kevin, emerging markets was the best performing asset class. Why do we have all our money in emerging markets? Well, in 2017, EM was up 37%. Now, if you look at the next year, EM was down 14%. So what most people want to do is buy the winners. Seems like a logical strategy. Well, it's doing well. Why don't I buy it? Hopefully it'll keep doing well. Unfortunately, it's not the case. All these different asset classes, they cycle. They have good years, they have bad years, good years and bad years. And everybody knows the basic rule, buy low, sell high. So just looking at the emerging markets, which are purple, if instead you said, well, gee, I think I'm going to buy the worst performing asset class and I'll wait until it has its day in the sun. That would be a better strategy, but nobody does that. So we help advise people, and this is Mike's primary job, to educate the employees not to do that. Instead, we want to see them go into the gray boxes, which are a balanced portfolio. And that we know we're going to get kind of a steady eddy return, won't be as volatile, and they're going to help them achieve their goals. Okay, let's keep going. So Mike, we talked a little bit about target date funds. Can you explain to us what they are and how they work?
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah. So target date funds. Now, target date funds are very important for retirement plans. Now, some of the main reasons why is because the investment industry is always promoting, as Kevin just talked about, participants making sure they're diversified in their investment strategy. Now, target date funds help participants achieve this all in one fund. The reason why is the investment managers of these funds construct these funds as a portfolio of funds with multiple investment strategies instead of as a fund with only a single investment strategy. So Elizabeth, can you go on to the next slide? Now this slide shows probably pretty much the most important aspect of a target date fund, which is how the target date fund strategy will evolve for the participant. Now there are two ways a target date can evolve for a participant. One way is the strategy is to retirement. So what this means is that the strategy will entail that the further a participant is away from the target date year, their investment strategy will be more exposed to equity funds, which can potentially help them grow their assets. Now, as a participant gets closer to the target date year, their investment strategy will become more exposed to bond funds, helping them preserve their assets. Now, the thing about the retirement strategy is that the evolving will stop once the participant reaches the target date year. Now, the strategy below that evolving one, the 2-1 is on top, the next strategy is on the bottom. This strategy will evolve through retirement. Now, what this means is once the participant reaches the target date year, the investment strategy does not stay the same. Instead, it will continue as the participant gets older, helping them to continually grow their money even during retirement. Now, we promote this strategy because we believe there's facts that participants are living longer and they need more money to live during retirement. Elizabeth, can you move on to the next slide? So that was the explanation of target date funds, which is one of the funds Kevin alluded to that we always promote in our plans because it helps with the asset allocations for each participant. Another fund that helps with the asset allocations for participants are called risk-based funds. Now, the reason why we promote these funds is these funds consist of multiple funds based on certain risk criteria and strategies. Now, we like these funds because it helps us and it helps participants align themselves with the market risk that they prefer. Now, that market risk could either be conservative, moderate conservative, it could be aggressive or super aggressive. But what you'll do is you'll assess what you feel you can take when it comes to the risk of the market, and you'll invest in that fund. Now, the one thing about this fund is that unlike target date funds, is the investment strategy will stay the same. So as a result, as you get older and your investment strategy or your risk tolerance might change, you have to continually change your investment strategy to align with the risk that you feel is appropriate to you at your age or your investment goals. Next slide, please. So those are the two funds that Kevin alluded to that will help with asset allocation that we always promote. Now he's going to go back to talk about how to analyze and how we help reduce fees for our plans.
So the second F is for fees. If we go to the next slide, in almost anything that you buy, as you buy more, they cost less. So I'm not sure exactly what you guys buy, but let's say you buy pipe. If you buy, I don't know, 100 pipes, I know that sounds silly, the cost is X per pipe. But if you buy 10,000 pipes, it's a lot less per pipe. So the same thing is true with 401k plans. As the plans grow from $1 million to $2 million to $3 million to $5 million, your cost should go down as a percentage. Now, let me, I'm not going to ask you, but I wonder, has anybody ever gotten a call from the record keeper saying, "Hi there, how are you? We've decided to lower your fees"? It doesn't happen. The only way it happens is if you force them to lower their fees. So the way that happens is you do what's called benchmarking. So if you go to the next slide, this is what we did for them, and this is what we do for all of our clients. We do it maybe not every year, but every other year as the plan grows. So here is showing the breakdown. In red, the current fee structure. So their record keeper was charging 0.35%, the third-party administrator 0.1, the funds, as we pointed out before, were 1.14, and the advisor was getting 0.65. So you add that up, it's 2.24%, which you'll see is very expensive. So we put this out for bid to 4 different companies. And you can see in the record keeper department, we were able to bring it down. 3 companies charged more, but one was substantially less at 0.15. The administrator, there's not a lot of spread here. It's always going to be between 0.5 and 0.1. It's a small savings, but it is a savings. The funds is where the big money is because they were way overpaying. So with all the 4 companies that we went out to bid, we insisted that they give us a lineup of index funds. And that brought the cost down to 0.1. That's a huge savings right there. And then the advisor was charging 0.65. We charge 0.5%. So it now got the cost down to 0.8, which is very low. And I would say that's about as low as we typically get, maybe 0.75, 0.85, but that's where we typically can get it. So that's a huge savings. And that all that money, it actually goes not to the employer, it goes to everybody who's in the plan. So it's all the employees get a savings, the owners get the savings, everybody gets a savings. And why is this significant? Next slide. So this was a study by Vanguard that says if you can reduce the annual fees by 0.5%, the typical retiree's nest egg increases by 10% over 30 years. So instead of having 300,000, they would have 330,000. They didn't do anything else different other than just lowering the fees. And here we lowered the fees over 1%. So that's probably going to give them a 20% increase. So basically free money that just for managing the plan better. Okay. So this is a big one. This is the third F, fiduciary review. And if you continue, one of the things we advocate is that you have a formal investment committee. It would be ideal. It could be that, it could be 1 owner, 2 owners, but ideally it has 1 non-owner on the committee. Typically it's going to be the CFO or the HR person. And that committee is going to create what's called, next, an investment policy statement. Now you don't have to create it. Basically, this is something that we create for the committee. And the investment policy statement is going to spell out all the different things that the plan is going to do. It's not super complicated. It's a couple of pages. The main thing is it's going to list that you're going to have a fund in each one of these categories. So this is how you can demonstrate if anybody says, well, your portfolio is not balanced. Well, yes, it's balanced. We have a fund for large value, large blend, large growth. We have international, we have global, we have bonds, we have a specialty fund. You'd be above criticism if you had something like this. And then further, it's going to spell out that you're going to use low-cost index funds. You're going to benchmark the plan every couple of years. You're going to have education meetings. All the things that we recommend are going to be in this investment policy statement. And once a year, the committee is going to look at it with us. We're going to take you through it, make sure we're doing everything that we're supposed to do, sign off on it, put it in. The next thing, which is going to be what we call the Fiduciary Binder. So we want you to be fully protected. So if you follow this program, the concept is we're going to give you what's called a fiduciary binder. Now, it used to be we give you an actual binder. Today, it's mostly a virtual binder. But the concept is, let's say a Department of Labor person comes in and they say, okay, we want to see your books. We're going to audit you. You say, terrific, thank you. Have a seat in the conference room. Let me get you a cup of coffee. And here is our fiduciary binder. Knock yourself out. And the concept is they're going to look at it, they're going to go away and leave you alone because you're going to have everything in order and there's nothing they can do to you. Okay, that's the concept. Let's keep going. But one of the big things they're going to look at is participation. So if you have a plan, not everybody, they don't have to do it. The employees don't have to participate unless you do one thing, which Mike's going to talk about in a second. So you might have 50% of your people in the plan, 70% of the people in the plan, but the IRS, the department, wants to make sure that lots of people are participating and getting the benefit of this, not just the owners and not just the highly paid executives. So Mike, can you take us through this a little bit?
Yes, definitely, Kevin. So yeah, as Kevin said, this is definitely a major topic that we always review with our clients. Next slide, please, Elizabeth. Now, it is, as he said, it's very important for a plan to have good participations, as he alluded to, especially amongst all the employee classes. And one way we try to do this is to have an education program in place for all our clients every year. And that helps improve participation rate, especially amongst their contribution rates and so forth. Elizabeth, next slide. Now, the main reason why it's important to have a good participation rate, especially among those who are not in the upper echelons of the earnings, is because every year the IRS requires testing. And now if your plan fails this testing, this means that you might be subjected to contribution corrections. And usually those contribution corrections are amongst your highly compensated employees. And so you definitely don't want that to happen, because most of the times those highly compensated employees are the employees that are in the C-suite and are the people who want to make sure that they're contributing at the highest amount. Next slide, please, Elizabeth. Now, two tools that we try to utilize when it comes to helping participation rate is something called automatic enrollment and automatic contribution escalations. Now, these two tools make it so that employees must opt out of the plan instead of opting in. It also helps to ensure that participants are gradually increasing their contributions to a desired contribution level that you pick out, helping them become retirement ready. And now the reason why these tools are important and have become very popular is they help take advantage of people's desire of inertia and not really wanting to do anything. So it puts them in the plan, it helps increase participation, and also helps increase contribution rates. Next slide, Elizabeth.
So Mike, before you go on, what would be a typical automatic enrollment percentage? Is it 20%, 10%? How do you start?
So yes, great question, Kevin. So most of the time we promote with our clients that they start at 3% and they gradually increase to either around 8 to 10%. And that's the desired amount where it will stop and the participation rate will then be at that rate. And usually that participation rate will increase 1% every year. So as we said, we want to gradually help participants get into that top echelon or that desired amount. We don't want them just automatically and then they don't really can't control their own budgets and so forth.
Terrific, thank you.
So yeah, basically overall, there are plenty of tools for companies to help increase their participation rate. So as advisors, whenever we take over a plan or look at it, we definitely make sure to help our employees, our clients, use these participation rates based on their employee base, their needs, and their goals. Now that can mean, as we said, implementing auto increase or escalation. That could also mean utilizing on-site employee education meetings, or even setting one-on-one employee educations around participant schedules, either via Zoom, telephone calls, or however it may work. We also are also willing to help create education that a participant can utilize at their own leisure. So overall, we help our clients make sure that they have an education program that meets their employees' desire and can meet any way that they can get in touch with their employees on multiple levels. Next slide. So I think, Kevin, you're going to take over the summary.
Yes, so go to the next one. So this is what we did for this particular company. So first we optimized the investment lineup. So we included, we talked about all the different types of funds, so they're properly diversified. They now have low-cost index funds. They have qualified default investment alternatives. So if anybody joins a plan and forgets to sign up for something, they're automatically enrolled in the target date fund, and that takes you out of the liability equation. So we have the target date funds, as Mike described, using the through design. We have risk-based models in case some people say, well, I would like to kind of figure out for myself what I want to do. Give me a model portfolio. They can also just pick whatever funds they want. We benchmark the plan to lower the fees from 2.24% down to 0.8%, which is a monster change. We put in the FLIP program, Fiduciary Liability Protection Program. So now they have their either real or virtual binder. And the big one, as Mike pointed out, is we improved employee participation from 60%, which is low, to 92%, which is very high. So this plan would be very hard for these owners to get sued over this plan, very hard. Next. So we removed all red flags from the Form 5500 tax filing. So, most people don't realize one of the questions on the Form 5500 says, do you have a qualified default investment alternative? And if the answer is no, right there, all the IRS agent has to do is flip, find the ones that say no, and call them up and start an audit. And he's going to win 100% of the time. So we want to make sure there are no red flags on the Form 5500. And as a result, we want to make sure that the owners are bulletproof, that if somebody comes in, they can't mess with them. A big part of that is the employee education program. And now the 92% of the employees are on track for a successful retirement. So that's a great result. Let's get next. So let me give you a couple of pictures so you can see it. Next. So this is the fee reduction. It's we don't often have, typically it's more like we could save 0.5%. To save this much money was unusual, but it happened. So there's a big opportunity for fee reduction typically. Next. This was the best part. Participation went from 60 to 92. Really good. Next. And this is the planning process. So typically what we do is, if you're interested in taking a look at your plan, we need to get some basic information. And then we're going to do what we call a stress test. So we're going to come back and show you, well, this is your plan. This is what's good about it. This is what's not so good about it. And here are some of the things you should consider fixing. And if you decide to go forward, we implement those changes. We take care of everything. Now, I will say up front, this is not an instant process. It takes a little time to make these changes and put everything into effect. And a lot of people feel like it's a lot of work. So I don't want to pretend it's nothing, but it's worth it. Then when it's through, you're going to either get a real binder or a virtual binder. And most importantly, there's going to be at least an annual review with the investment committee, with Michael and myself. And Michael, all through the year, is going to be holding education meetings. So it's a real continuous process that works. So if you'd like to go forward with that, that's how it works. Next. So as a result of this, I would say 100% of the time, we're going to be able to lower the costs. We're going to be able to achieve 100% compliance, and we're going to dramatically reduce employer liability. So that's a pretty good result. So if that's of interest to you, you can reach out to Elizabeth. You see her email there and her phone number. If you'd like, you can ask her to send you a copy of the 7 biggest mistakes. You could set up a call, and then in subsequent webinars, we're going to have other books available. So you can definitely, order a copy of whichever one you want.
I want to thank everyone for coming and thank our presenters for sharing all of the helpful information today. And what I always like to say is, when in doubt, check us out. So please check out our website. It's wealthpreservationsolutions.com, and all of the information that we're talking about, our process, a little more history about our firm, specifically Kevin and Paul, myself and Michael, is all available there. And we have a lot of content there that you might find interesting in terms of videos and articles that both Kevin and Paul have written and collected throughout the years. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your time. We'll see everyone soon. Have a great day.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.